views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Open, the one and only show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world right to you. I'm your host, Daren Jaime, and today we'll update you what's happening in and around our borough, as well as across New York City. Coming up on this particular episode of Open, we'll highlight several impactful segments that have actually taken place over the last couple of weeks. And then we want you to stay tuned because all this and much more is heading your way. Right now, we're officially open. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Open. I am Daren Jaime. Of course, we thank you for joining us. As always, you can watch Open live here on BronxNet Channel 67. We also encourage you to watch on our Manhattan Neighborhood Network channels. Open is being broadcast live simultaneously in Manhattan on the MNN Network. You can also stay connected to us on our social media platforms at BronxNet TV, and of course, our website at bronxnet.org. Well, want to let you know that health literacy can actually help prevent health problems and protect our health, as well as better manage the problems and unexpected situations that can happen. We sat down with the attending neurologist at Montefiore Medical Center and assistant professor of neurology at Albert Einstein College of Medicine, Kathryn F. Kirchoff Torres, to discuss the importance of good health literacy and how people can navigate the medical system.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today.
You know, when we have the conversation about health literacy, I think sometimes the definition goes astray. So let's first educate our viewers a little bit on health literacy and how it actually affects each and every one of us.
Yeah, so my goal today is to help people to learn better how to navigate the health system. So as we know, things have become increasingly complex with electronic medical records and with virtual visits now, especially during the time of COVID, as well as how to interface with the pharmacy and with multiple specialists as well as primary care. So I think it's very important for people to be facile in how to manage and navigate their own health.
Yeah. Why is it such an issue for us to be able to be health literate, if you will? Because when it comes to the fact of going to doctors, many of us go to doctors, we have visits, we know these things, but when it comes to health literacy, sometimes we just fall short.
Yes, well, I think it's something that they really don't teach in school. I really think it's and I think it's so critical for people to learn this because I believe that knowing how to navigate health will help people have better outcomes and hopefully prevent the long-term sequelae of chronic medical conditions such as hypertension and diabetes. If they can advocate for themselves earlier on in the course of the disease to have consistent care and that long-term follow-up.
Yeah. And so as you're walking people through this and helping people become more literate, what is it that they should know?
Well, I think the first thing that's important is while you're well, that's the time to establish care with a primary care doctor. You don't want to wait until you become sick to find a primary care doctor because it really starts with prevention. So if you have a primary care doctor, you can start doing yearly physicals to be screened for conditions such as hypertension, diabetes, sleep apnea, in order to get started on treatment early to prevent complications such as heart disease and stroke. You can also discuss with your doctor your family history of things such as coronary artery disease and cancer so that you can start the general age-appropriate cancer screening such as mammograms at age 40 and colon cancer screening at age 45, for example. And you can also talk about your particular own personal health risks, and they may tailor your screening to your own family or personal medical history.
A lot of times we deal with prescription medications and we know that that can be a challenge. Just keeping up with them, knowing the names of them, knowing when to administer them, refills, the whole 9 yards. That can be a huge mountain for so many people. And especially if you're just entering into the fact of having prescriptions. Talk to us a little bit about prescription medications and how to navigate that.
It can be a real challenge to manage prescription medications. So many medications sound the same or have two names. In my particular specialty, I care for stroke patients, and sometimes there may be issues with vision impairment and reading and language after a stroke. And so reading a pill bottle can be a real challenge. So I think there's a few important steps initially to take. So familiarizing yourself with how to read a pill bottle label. I think take a moment to look at your pill bottles and you'll see that there's the pharmacy name on the top, the prescribing doctor, the medication with the instructions about how to take the medication and whether or not there are refills left. So if you see that it's time for you to get a refill, meaning it may say 0 refills left or no refills remaining, you would want to make sure that you're calling the doctor who originally prescribed the medication and that you're specifying which pharmacy you would like them to send it to. Oftentimes people ask us for a refill and we put the refill through the computer, but the computer may default to a pharmacy that was used previously. It may not be the one that the patient is actually planning to go and pick up the medications from. So there may be a disconnect as the medication may not be available when they go to the pharmacy. So understanding when it's time to just call your pharmacy if you have refills remaining, or when it's time to actually call your physician because there are no more refills remaining and they need to rewrite the prescription is an important thing to understand.
Yeah. So, Kathryn, what do we do now for a person that's watching right now saying, listen, I need help. This is all new to me. I really want to try to learn how to navigate this. What do I do?
Well, I think asking questions is a good place to start. So that's why having that, primary care physician is there. A big question people have right now, of course, is whether, they can receive vaccinations. And of course, talking about COVID vaccinations is a big issue right now, but there are other important vaccinations that adults should have depending on their age, such as the pneumonia vaccination, the shingles vaccination. So asking those questions when you're going for your physical, and I think that's very helpful. I think it's important to understand that while your doctor may have an electronic medical record, it may not communicate with other of your medical care team's electronic medical records. For example, if they're in a different practice or at a different institution. So asking for your medication list to be printed, carrying your medication bottles to each visit can be helpful to clarify any discrepancies. Asking for any important lab results or records to be printed for you so that you can carry them to the other physicians that you receive care from in order to make sure everybody is in the loop. And we don't want to depend on the computer if it may not be communicating between doctors.
Yeah. And so when I think about this, I think about myself and I say, wow, I remember when I was first introduced in the patient portal, and I was like, oh my God, more, I got to do this, really? But I did find it to be very helpful at the end. But I want to go back to my original thought of, oh my God, I got to do this, patient portal, and the many other people who look at it and kind of like ignore to say, this can wait. Give some people some encouragement or some advice as to tell them why something as simple as a patient portal might be very, very advantageous to them.
Yes, it's a great point. So I've been practicing here at Montefiore in the Bronx for 11 years now, and I've been really impressed with how well our patients here have accepted the portal and have started to use the portal to communicate during COVID. It's very helpful for patients because they can send a message sort of like an email through the portal to reach us directly rather than having to go through a phone tree, which I think is a huge benefit. They can request refills electronically. They can access their own records and their own lab results so they can communicate those to their other parts of their medical team. So I think there's a lot of benefits. It is a little bit of a hurdle for people who may not have been very familiar with computers beforehand, but if you can use an email or operate a smartphone, I think most people do very well. We also encourage our patients here who are mostly elderly to enlist a grandchild or a neighbor who's young and technically savvy to help.
And so enlisting that help, I mean, enlisting a young person can actually be quite advantageous. What do you find to be some of the biggest challenges that we have for people wanting to become more health literate?
I think that right now we're dealing with a time period where people don't know exactly how to interpret the large amount of information that's out there on the internet. How do you decipher quality information from information that may be false? And I think that's where having a trusted primary care doctor can be helpful. Also, using websites of trusted institutions such as hospitals, academic institutions, journals that are peer reviewed. So making sure that you're getting your information from reputable sources, asking questions. I always encourage patients to not wait until the next visit if they have a question, but to call and ask. For example, sometimes patients may experience a side effect of a medication, or a medication may be too expensive. And it's always best to sort of call and ask and before stopping the medication on your own, because sometimes we can help and provide some more information or provide an alternative. So just keep asking questions, keep the lines of communication open with your doctor, and try to seek out those reliable sources if you're looking for information on the internet.
Yeah. What questions are you getting the most these days, given the fact that we're in the midst of this pandemic? I'm sure there's a pretty common threshold of questions that you get.
I think the main questions are revolving around vaccinations and the significant benefits in reducing the risk for serious illness and hospitalization. A question I wish people would ask more often is, as we mentioned earlier, what are my age-appropriate cancer screenings? Now, we have a lot of urgent care centers and clinics around the area, and they're increasing in number. And they're a good alternative for when your doctor's office is closed, or you have an illness, off hours, or you can't be fit in for the day. But we don't want to rely on them for our ongoing care, because those sort of more longitudinal health maintenance issues may not be addressed. So kind of, ensuring that you are not losing sight of the important preventative care while we're in the midst of this pandemic, I think is very important.
Yeah. And so for people who really want to get more information and get dialed into how, we need a tutorial, we need to learn how to navigate this, what can they do?
Okay, well, I think first step would be, when you see your doctor next time, they usually will give you some information, a tutorial that they print out about how to log on to the portal. I think that's the first step. You can, try to send a message through to your doctor if you have a question. Basically, you can ask your pharmacist as well. Pharmacists are wonderful resources. You can ask them to explain to you what they're seeing on the pill bottle, and kind of the process of when they should contact the pharmacist versus the physician. And I wanted to add one other important point, because we do see this, people get sick unexpectedly, and sometimes we may need to speak with a family member or a healthcare proxy for the patient. So I think it's a good idea now, while you're well, to figure out who your next of kin would be, who would speak on your behalf, ensure that, that's been established. And if it's somebody other than, for example, if your spouse would legally be a next of kin for you, but if you prefer to have someone else be your healthcare proxy, you would want to appoint that. And that's something that you can do as well during a routine visit. You can always appoint a healthcare proxy and talk with your doctor about sort of your overall goals of care in the instance of illness. So I think having those conversations when you're well is a good way to get started on your health literacy, so that you're not in an emergency situation when you become ill.
Well, thank you, Kathryn. A lot of information to be able to digest, and hopefully people will become more active in their day-to-day health. I want to tell you, we've been talking to Kathryn Kirchoff, who is the attending neurologist at Montefiore Medical Center and assistant professor of neurology at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. Now, for more information, we encourage you to go to the website at montefiore.org. Stay with us. We've got more show coming up. Open continues right after this.
you're struggling to afford your internet bills during the pandemic, there's a temporary government program that may be able to help. It's called the Emergency Broadband Benefit, and it provides up to $50 monthly discount on your broadband bill to qualifying households. Find more information about the program, including if you qualify and how to enroll, at fcc.gov/broadbandbenefit, or call toll-free at 833-511-0311. That's 833-511-0311.
And welcome back to the show. Bottom Line is a not-for-profit organization helping thousands of first-generation students from low-income backgrounds stay in college as well as complete their degrees. Now, we recently sat down with the executive director of the New York region of Bottom Line, Shauwea Hamilton, and we encourage you to check it out.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you and sharing in this important conversation. Keeping students in school, very important, and no time greater than now as students are returning back to the classroom, but some are returning back with in-person learning after having to deal with the virtual environment. And I know that your hands have been pretty full just trying to do that work. So if our viewers don't know, give us a little bit about your organization.
Well, you set us up very nicely in terms of sharing our mission, which is to partner with underserved students to get into and through the right college and successfully launch a career. The students that we are working with, their parents have not gone through the college experience. They've not spent the last 12 years of their life getting ready for the college experience. And so Bottom Line helps to supplement their understanding of college and support them in our access program with making a highly informed choice on which college to attend. And that is really about, obviously, the academic fit and alignment of interests, the cultural and social fit in terms of meeting their extracurricular needs and interests, but also the financial and affordability fit. One of the single most reason that a student from a low-income background drops out of college is that they are taking on an unaffordable college campus that isn't set up to support them through to degree. And so Bottom Line really supports students in selecting colleges that are teed up to support them to the bachelor's degree. And then with our success program, we are taking those freshmen and students who are kind of stepping into colleges in New York for the first time. So I work specifically with our New York students, and we provide an advisor who guides them through all of the critical components of college, from the selection of your courses to managing your time, particularly that first year with the finals experiences, and also building a sense of community. How do we support students who might be stepping into institutions that don't look like their high schools, they don't look like the communities that they live in, and that can be a shock, and really helping them, supporting them with both mental health supports, adaptability, self-awareness support, so that they can feel and be their complete selves in those new spaces. And our program is all about getting to that final bachelor's degree, because it's all about economic mobility for us as an organization. We want our students to achieve that $1 million marker in their career, which is what a bachelor's degree gets you to $1 million more in your lifetime earnings than those without. And that's the pathway, the most reliable pathway to economic stability.
I know that for students, it's very overwhelming, and also for parents. I mean, I've had a son in college, and I know the application process can be daunting. You're moving into another level of academics that, you're unfamiliar with. What are some of the common challenges that you're finding for students who are trying to enter into the collegiate environment right through the door?
Yeah, so it is the study skills and time management. I don't think there's one college student who does not struggle with time management in this new normal for the undergraduate experience. And so I would say that is first and foremost and not unique to the students that we are serving. I think the some of the adaptive aspects of college, how to navigate the system, how to leverage and build relationships with your professors, those social aspects and social networking within college, that is a place where Bottom Line really supports students in building their self-advocacy muscles in that higher ed space where they might not be used to stepping in and advocating for themselves. I don't know that there is a institution of higher education that doesn't have complex structures. And so that's a place that we offer significant support as well. And then the other part I mentioned is supporting them to have a sense of belonging, really trying to find the places where they can find their people, whether that's the tech people, the nursing people, the variety of different identity-based student unions, really supporting them to find the place where they belong, because that sense of belonging also supports students to the finish line.
Yeah. And with full-time students, we know that they have their job, their educational responsibilities to be able to handle, but we also know that there's another component of students that also have to deal with work and that work environment. Any help there in being able to balance and navigate that work environment, because you have, someone trying to take care of family members, if not themselves, and then at the same time be able to get that degree. Is there anything available to help them out?
Well, so this is where time management always comes into play, of course, but Bottom Line also really supports students in so actually stepping back, we support students with some financial aid that might allow them to do things they otherwise couldn't do. We have some different scholarship programs that we're affiliated with, Dream It Real with Coach Foundation and Pacer Scholars, 2 scholarships that really create the environment for students to focus on their studies with some supplemental aid. Of course, that's not for every single student we serve, but really for us, when we talk about our thought leadership and our advocacy, it's also supporting with potential employers to increase the number of paid internships that exist. A lot of times our students are choosing between the paycheck they need over the summer or the internship and resume experience that they really want to build for themselves, which is what gets them to that first destination in their career. And so we work and build partnerships with employers who are willing to provide compensation for those internships and allowing them to do both. And then the other part is in our advisement structure, it's being realistic. What can you do? First, what do you have to do? If you have to work 30 hours a week, what can you do? And how do we backwards map you to a calendar or a schedule that allows you to maintain both? Because the last thing we want you to do is take on too much and then have to drop out or get a grade that you're less than happy with. It's better to go slow to get to that finish line than to overextend yourself and sacrifice your experience, your mental health and sanity, and potentially increase your burnout from the experience.
Yeah. How do we get people connected to you guys? Because certainly I know there's some parents out there that are watching, maybe some students who are shaking their head and saying, this might be the help I actually need.
Yeah, so I know a large part of your viewership are based in the Bronx, and I'll tell you that a quarter of our current students hail from the Bronx. We actually have some partnerships with high schools in the Bronx. The most of our Bottom Line students currently are coming from Bronx Leadership Academy, Central Park, Marble Hill High for International Studies, and Morris Academy for Collaborative Studies. And that's just where we happen to have stronger partnerships with a stronger referral pattern. But you can go to our website, www.bottomline.org, and find out about our recruitment patterns. We are accepting applications in about February for the upcoming school year. And it's really, you meet our requirements. You don't have to have a specific relationship. You can just apply directly online, and we encourage and love that.
Yeah, Shauwea, thank you so much for sharing some much needed tips. Definitely want to get people connected to your organization, but thank you for taking the time out with us here this morning.
Daren, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All righty. Well, we want our viewers to know now, if you want more information, we encourage you, please visit their website. Their website is bottomline.org. And then you can also follow them on Twitter at bottomline.org. We encourage you, please don't go anywhere. We do have more Open coming up. We're taking a quick break, and then Open returns right after this. Well, welcome back. Environmental racism continues to be a pressing contemporary challenge for the Bronx community. We talk with representatives from the Thinkubator, discussing their policy brief and recommendations on the ways that the community can actually change their conditions.
Joining us now to share a little bit more details is the Thinkubator's president and CEO, Dr. Edward Summers. And then we're also joined by the director of the think tank, Dr. Lessie Branch. And both of you, thanks for joining us. And I'll start off with Dr. Branch. And Dr. Branch, share with us a little bit about this, because when we talk about environmental injustice, we can definitely see with the Bronx being number 62 on the health chart across the borough, that a lot of that comes really from environmental injustice.
So again, thank you for having us, Daren. It's a pleasure to be with you. And again, most of what we do, even in terms of the policy briefs that we publish, are driven by youth voices. And as you know, the Thinkubator is an organization that lifts up youth and gives them a platform to create the agenda, to work with organizations to help solve problems, and to even engage in the civic space. And so the brief really, again, is driven by issues that the Bronx youth at the Thinkubator want to highlight. So, you know, they put together a survey. Actually, Julian Joyner put together a survey, administered it, and I can't say we were surprised by the results. I mean, we have known for the last 40 some odd years, and possibly even longer than that, the intentional destruction, if you will, of Bronx infrastructure that results in a lot of the things that we are seeing today in terms of health outcomes. And, you know, to your point, the Bronx is number 62 out of all 62 counties in the state of New York when it comes to health outcomes.
Yeah. And so, Dr. Summers, share with us a little bit about the brief and what you were able to uncover.
Sure, thanks, Daren. And again, I echo the sentiment of my colleague, Dr. Branch. We appreciate being here. So with the brief, we surveyed, we have two data sets with this particular brief. We've surveyed New York City population, and then we have a much smaller data set of Bronxites of the data set that we looked at. And when we looked at knowledge about environmental pollution, environmental injustice, and racism, you know, most people didn't really know, and I think part of it is they didn't really understand the terms. But when we looked at the data a little closer, people knew that in the Bronx particularly, that things like pollution, things like asthma, things like noise, things like having a large concentration of diesel trucks in the Bronx, they knew those things, right? They knew that those things existed. So by default, they know about environmental racism, but may not know the terminology. And so what a lot of people said was that these things happen in the Bronx, right? You know, they acknowledge the high rates of asthma in the Bronx among young people. They acknowledge the noise. They acknowledge the air not being at the same quality as other communities. What the survey did was it actually looked at, all right, we know, we kind of knew this stuff already, but let's look at what should we be thinking about? How do we deal with these challenges that we have in the Bronx? For years, we already know that it's been documented that there's been environmental pollution, and as you both indicated, you know, we're at number 62 in terms of outcomes, the last borough, the last county in the state. So a lot of what the survey looked at was what can we do and what should we be thinking about in terms of righting the wrongs of the environmental injustices that happen in the Bronx. So the think tank team and the young people, based on the recommendations of the people we surveyed, came up with 4 major recommendations. One being making sure that we incorporate youth as we think about the challenges that we have in with environmental pollution and environmental racism. So how do we incorporate youth feedback in this process? Too often, it's the policy wonks out there making the decisions. So there's adults, and we don't include the young people in our decision-making process. So how do we get their feedback? How do we think about a youth-led, a youth-driven environmental justice policy framework in the Bronx? 2, it's looking at green jobs. How do we think about, as we move forward and as we support development in the Bronx, what are some of those green jobs? What are some of those development projects that the county supports, that the Bronx Borough President supports, that the city supports, and how do we make sure that these are green jobs, and how do we train and prepare people for these green jobs? Another aspect is in looking at our planning in general is to make sure that we are reimagining our planning and making sure that as we support buildings, that they're green-led buildings, they're LEED certified buildings, right? So making sure that in our planning process that we think about a more just base planning process. And then I would say our last one is about green energy for low-income housing, right, and NYCHA type of housing. How do we support, as we think about the assets that we have in our community, which is a plethora of low-income NYCHA housing, how do we incorporate green energy technologies into those developments to make sure that we have a more environmentally friendly infrastructure in the Bronx? So those are some of the recommendations that came out of this brief. And I think it's always important to think about the first one I mentioned, which is how do we incorporate young people in the process? How do we get them in the process, thinking creatively about some of these challenges that we have? Thinkubator has something amazing called the Thinkubator Solves program, where young people actually tackle issues that exist in the borough and exist for companies and exist in the public sector. And so this is just a great opportunity to really engage young people, get them thinking creatively, get them thinking without any walls, quite frankly, and to allow them to really go ham in terms of really just going and really thinking creatively about how to solve some of the challenges. So that's a major part of what we got out of it. We'd love to hear my colleague, Dr. Branch, as well.
Yeah, well, I want to talk to Dr. Branch about climate change, right? We talk about climate change, particularly with environmental injustice, environmental racism. What's the role of climate change in all of this?
So it's very, we can implicate it for sure, right? And to the folks who still think that climate change is a hoax, look at what's happening in California, look at what's happening on the west coast of Canada. And so something that I looked at earlier this week, it was a phrase that Daren Walker from the president of Ford Foundation, he said, he pretty much talked about the whole situation that we are in, just in terms of inequity in general. It's like we're eating lobster on the Titanic, right? And so if we don't all get on board and speak with one mind and have unified action, we're all going to go down with the sinking ship. And so I think that's really a call to action, number one, whether you believe climate change is real or not. And so it's really apropos to failing to recognize the origins or even the underpinnings, if you will. And we're all going to end up under the sea if we don't do something about it, not necessarily because we're on a sinking ship, but because sea levels are rising, polar ice caps are melting. And then just from a political perspective, or just, think about what happens if the Earth becomes inhabitable. Where do we go, right? Because there's no other planet that we can all just pack up and go to. And then just think about the implications of environmental racism for the Bronx. As it becomes more and more unsustainable, the climate, if we fail to act, we politically end up losing, if you will, representation, because if the borough becomes so inhabitable to the point that people move out, then we lose seats in Congress, and then that makes our uphill fight and battle to reverse some of these things that we're experiencing that much harder, because we don't have the representation that we need. And so that's sort of the frame that I'm bringing to it, and why the electeds that we presently have definitely need to make this a priority if they want to continue to have the privilege of leading the borough.
Yeah, Dr. Lessie Branch, Dr. Edward Summers, thank you so much for coming and sharing with me.
Thank you for having us.
No, thank you. Well, listen, now, if you want more information, please visit the website at thethinkubator.org, and then also follow them on their social media platform at The Thinkubator. We do have more Open coming up. We encourage you to stay with us. Don't go anywhere. Open returns right after this.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
And welcome back. Vocation Instruction Project Community Services provides a full continuum of social service care to the most vulnerable and underserved. We recently talked with CEO of VIP Community Services, Debbian Fletcher-Blake, on how the organization is improving the health and well-being of the Bronx, as well as its surrounding communities. We'll take a look at that right now.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about VIP Community Services.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, for somebody who doesn't know about VIP Community Services, give us a quick introduction.
Certainly. So VIP was started about 47 years ago by a priest in a church basement to provide needed services to people who needed substance use services at that time. As time evolved and needs changed, VIP continued to add to the services, the substance use services, and today we provide medical care, behavioral health care, so substance use and mental health services. We provide housing, we provide shelter services, vocational services, and also care coordination. We have 2 outpatient substance use programs for patients who are diagnosed with substance use disorders. We have an outpatient substance use program and one of the largest methadone program in New York State, serving 1,500 clients per day. In a nutshell, that is who VIP is.
Yeah. And with the COVID-19 pandemic, the way that it is, obviously a lot of people have really needed the need for mental health services, behavioral health services. What have you found as far as servicing your clients during this period of time?
So that's a great question. What we've done, we've addressed this issue from various lenses. We've looked at the need for vaccinations, starting there. And what we've done is to increase access to underserved communities. It is important for you to bring services to them. And what we have done is we've taken vaccinations to people. We are partnering with religious leaders, with faith-based leaders, with schools, with community leaders, also with elected officials, and and foundations and local foundations. So we are taking vaccinations to people where they are, including to seniors in their homes. So that was the first thing that we did as a quick response. Then as we realized the tremendous need for mental health services and also for physical health services where people haven't accessed their physical care because they're afraid to come into a facility post-COVID, we are providing telehealth services to them. So people can get care in their homes where they are. And for people who are willing to come into the office, we are open for them. We stayed open during COVID so that those people that we were not able to reach by telephone or virtually would be able to get their services with us.
Yeah, and I know that addiction services are what you also, also what you provide, particularly for those who are really struggling. As we talk about the times and where we are today, we know that a lot of people have relapsed. A lot of people have really fallen into a bad place, given the fact that the economy, employment, family structure, and family dynamics changing. Talk to us about your addiction program and the clients that you're serving.
Right. So as you know, and as you have said, addiction, the rates of addiction has really plummeted since the COVID epidemic. We're actually in a second epidemic, right? So the substance use epidemic was here, and it is still here. And then came COVID pandemic on top of that. So the rates of people who are dying from opioid use has really increased exponentially in New York State and nationally, as the data has shown. And so we continue to be a provider that provides access to substance use services. We have 24-hour open access services, so people needing substance use care can call us and we will either send a peer out to them where they are, or they can come in and have discussions with or peer and or staff. In addition to that, we have two residential programs. One is a co-ed program for males and females, and anyone can who needs not inpatient, but outpatient ongoing care can get care in those facilities. And then we have one that's male only, and again, the same thing, people needing services can be treated there. On average, people stay in those two programs anywhere from 6 months to 9 months, some shorter and some a little bit longer. And what we do is we help people and their families and reestablish them so they can be reintegrated in the community and go on to live lives where they're more productive than when they came to see us. While they're there, we provide them with vocational training. We do skills assessment, whether it's their GED or basic learning skills that are developed, carpentry. We refer them for job placement while they're in training so that when they leave, they can have the resources that they need to continue to function independently and function well in the communities where they will be reintegrated. And then we continue to see them in our outpatient program as needed. So they either transition to our outpatient programs where they continue to see the counselors and to work with their medications that they are prescribed, whether it's methadone or buprenorphine or some other choice that their provider has made for them in conjunction with the individuals and sometimes their families. So the services that we provide wrap around them to maintain sobriety. And it's not just for people who are using opioids, but also alcohol and other substances that who need our services.
Yeah, I know you talked about the addiction services, but also your organization does a great job in really providing housing and shelter services as well. We know that a lot of people have been dealing with this, particularly with the homeless crisis in New York City that continues to grow rampant. But talk to us more about that and give us a little bit more insight into the work that you do.
So we provide supportive housing and low-income housing for people in the Bronx. And in our supportive housing portfolio, we have about 198 units of supportive housing serving people, either individuals and families. The majority of the people in our supportive housing have a diagnosis of either mental health or substance use or a combination of both, or some physical illness that allows them to require our services or support services. While they're there, we have counselors who work with them on whatever skills development they need, whatever services they need, linking them to the right resources, to medical services, to behavioral health services if they need it, to jobs, different groups that are provided to keep them stimulated and also to foster a community of involvement and in the facilities where they work. So it gives them a sense of purpose while they're there. Then from or supportive housing, there are people who will leave after sometimes several years into independent housing. They continue to stay with us for a long time. In our affordable housing, that's a little bit different. It's for people with low income, and so they're independent and they don't require the supportive services that we provide. Then we also provide shelter services, and in our shelters, what we have done is we moved away from the general population. Currently, we have one shelters for women with mental illness and substance use. So we tend to take on the challenges that are a little bit more than the general population. We are also talking with Department of Homeless Services, and we'll be providing shelter services for men in Harlem who have mental illness. Again, taking it a step higher than just a general population, because we believe strongly that we are able to provide the essential services that are needed for people with these sensitive diagnoses and provide services that are holistic and also respectful and dignified in ways that will provide good outcomes for them.
Yeah. Well, before we go, please tell people how, what's the best way that they can really tap into your services?
Well, we are available 24/7 in our open access program. You can go to our website, www.vipservices.org, and ask questions, schedule appointments, or find information how you can reach us. You can also call us at 718-583-5150. And an operator will connect you to the right department that you need.
Debbian, been great having you here on the show. Thank you for joining us today, and certainly continue the great work over at VIP Community Services.
And thank you so much for having me.
All righty, well, thank you. Just stay with us because we do have more show. Don't go anywhere. Open's continuing right after this. And welcome back. The Police Athletic League, better known as the PAL, provides recreational, educational, and cultural and social activities to over 20,000 youth in New York City annually. We spoke with the Chief of Programs at the PAL, Danielle Madden-Buck, and we encourage you to check it out right now.
Thank you, Daren. Thank you for having me.
So I told you at the beginning, I said, well, this is like a no-brainer for me because I'm a PAL kid. I grew up in the streets of Harlem. I should say streets of Harlem, but in the streets of Harlem. And that's where I was. And I remember our Police Athletic League. It was very huge for me because it gave me a place to go that I could actually play basketball and then also cultivate relationships. So share with us a little bit more about the PAL and the work that it's doing to really cultivate relationships, but not just do some relationship building, but also some community building as well.
But as you know, the Police Athletic League has been around since 1914. And, I think we're more impactful now than ever, especially coming out of a pandemic. During the pandemic, we shifted over to virtual programming and then started in-person programming. And this summer, we serviced over 4,500 kids citywide. In summer camps, we had play streets, we had street games, we had team centers. Specifically in the Bronx, we had like over 800 participants citywide. So we've done a lot this summer.
Yeah. And one of the things that's been done actually through all of this is really building that bridge. And we know that there's that growing tension between community and law enforcement. And sometimes it doesn't seem to get any better. But I do know that through the work of things such as the PAL, there's a gap that's actually being bridged.
Absolutely. I think it's important that kids get to know law enforcement officers. And I think it's important for law enforcement officers to get to know the community and the kids in the community. Actually, I think it was about a month ago, Police Commissioner Shea came to our Webster PAL and was playing kids one-on-one in basketball. We have our Saturday Night Lights program over on Webster Avenue. We have it at other locations, including the South Bronx Center and in Manhattan, the Holmes Center, the same center you mentioned that you went to. And, officers are there every Saturday and they don't just, hang around. They get to know the kids, they get to play. Also our Play Street and Street Game program, the kids come out, the officers come out, the community comes out. We have double dutch, we have basketball. We actually have dodgeball too. The kids get to play dodgeball against the officers, which is a lot of fun for both the kids and the officers. So, the officers have been very involved. And this school year, starting in September, we're really pushing to make one of our core components at PAL is our junior police program. Really so the kids understand, what it takes to be an officer, but allow to open the conversation between the officers and the kids about their role and what it's like to be an officer, and for the kids to understand what it's like, for day to day, and vice versa.
How would you gauge the impact between, having law enforcement community, and particularly the young people, have that opportunity to interface with one another, and it's not on a negative level?
I think it's great. What I've noticed is through the years, before my role as chief of programs, I was also director of sports at one point. And what I've noticed is, especially with the teen population, like little kids, they sit there and they're like, wow, there's a police officer, and they get to know the officer. Teenagers is a little bit different because some teenagers may not have a great experience with the police. And what I've noticed is throughout the years, we've had some certain situations where an officer would go and he would get a phone call and he would have to go over to a house or go over to a building. And there were a couple of times they saw the kids that they played basketball with. So it was like, hey, I know you and I know you. So it allowed them to say like, hey, that officer's pretty cool, telling their friends that as well. So it allows them to be looked at as humans also, not just, based on their uniform.
Right.
So.
We know a lot of work goes on during the summer, but you also talked a little bit about school. And yes, it's hard to believe, but school is right around the corner. And after school programs are really huge at the PAL. Give us a little bit about the work that's being done after school to really make sure the kids don't miss the mark.
Yeah, so we have a lot of STEM and literacy programs within. We know obviously with the pandemic happening, there has been a learning loss in general. Every summer there's a learning loss, but this year in particular, being that most of the classes were remote. So we do have emphasis on STEM literacy. One of the things that we're actually implementing this year is entrepreneurship skills, teaching kids financial literacy. So those are the major things, but we really do put an emphasis on that. And this year, even more than ever, social emotional learning, just because, this pandemic has hit not only the city, but nationally and globally. So it's affected all of us.
I know that for me growing up, it was a key place to be at the PAL, to do what I did. It was a good part of my teen development. Are you still finding that teens are really benefiting from having an opportunity to participate in PAL programs?
Yes, absolutely. This summer, we actually made sure that we kept all of our teen centers open in the summer. Traditionally, we haven't, we weren't open all the time in the summer with our teen centers. We've actually moved our schedule around to make sure that we were open in evenings and on weekends, because weekends is important, especially for our teenagers. And I would say with our teenagers, we have acting programs. Our acting program is actually overseen by Tony Danza, who, obviously everybody knows Tony Danza from Who's the Boss, and Taxi. And he's amazing with the kids. And so is Brian Hills, who's the director of our acting program itself. We have resume writing. We have sports and recreation, and we actually have internships. We just actually finished a internship with Madison Square Garden. So we have that. We had SYEP this summer. We had 1,000 kids in SYEP. So, our teams right now, we're putting a major focus on our teen population because I think it's beneficial for them to be a part of the PAL and just be involved and have opportunities.
Yeah, almost got to get out of here because we're out of time, but I want to make sure that I get an opportunity to talk about this. I remember back in the day, it still goes on, the PAL Play Streets. If somebody doesn't know about a Play Street, tell them what it is.
So Play Street is where we shut down the street and we just let the kids play. So it's, we have double dutch, they use chalk. Right now we have one on 196th and Bainbridge in the Bronx. And it's just a place where kids get to know the officers and they, take over the street. And it brings us back to our traditional days of playing in the street. So, and we still have those running right now.
Yeah, well, I know this obviously very beneficial. It was definitely in my growing up a staple in what I did. And I know it's a staple for a lot of kids in their lives as well. Danielle, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All righty. Well, we want to let you know that if you want more information, we encourage you to visit the website at palnyc.org. And then also, we want you to do us a favor as well. Visit them on social media at PAL New York. Well, we've come to the end of our show today. We want to thank all of our guests for joining us. Most of all, the viewer, for tuning in. Now, if you missed any part of today's show, we encourage you to catch the Recablecast on Bronxnet Channel 67. Also, if you have Verizon Plus, that'd be Channel 2133, or anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. Don't forget about our social media platforms at BronxNet TV. Now, if you desire a brand new episode of Open, we'll come back on Friday. My girl, Rena Valentine, will join you with the best in arts and entertainment. Until then, I'm Daren Jaime saying take care, God bless, and keep this channel wide open.